can be mitigated with the proper strategies. These risks surround trust, regulations, privacy, and financials. Just to highlight one of those for now, regulations. We mentioned Bill C-52 earlier, which would require greater reporting when it comes to customer experience and sustainability initiatives. PCA would be well positioned to adjust to these regulations or any others in the future by having a centralized data system that is easier to edit and communicate to relevant stakeholders. Now that you're aware of what the risks are and how to mitigate them, let's talk about future potential applications.
When thinking about how Project Cascade is beneficial in the future, we must realize it is not now a temporary fix. It is not plugging a hole. This is something that is going to transform Pacific Coastal Airlines into a company that is able to tackle the future. They will be able to, firstly, ensure operational efficiency. The reason we decided on middleware is because right now, data is not talking to each other. Maintenance is off on its own island. There's very little connection. It's hard to recommend a solution, a software, or an API when you don't know what the data is doing and where the redundancy is. However, after implementing TIBCO, we are then able to see data redundancies and consider solutions, such as in-housing certain parts of this process, considering buying bolt-in or best-in-breed software, or other solutions to condense some of the complicated architecture that Dever highlighted earlier. Secondly, in streamlining informed decision-making, these AI applications are endless. AI continues to evolve day after day, and airlines are already using artificial intelligence for things like route planning, physical inventory management, think about the drinks you're receiving on a flight, and even baggage tracking. And lastly, when we think about the people, really what the core of PCA is doing is trying to connect individuals, adapting to needs within the region of individuals who may be in harder to reach areas. By implementing TIBCO and Project Cascade, analytics enable and connect these individuals, which brings us back to our initial question. How should Pacific Coastal Airlines develop a unified and responsive information system to meet these needs? And we believe we've answered it, firstly, by evaluating the current information system, realizing the siloed structure, and then identifying how we can integrate and optimize it through storage, analysis, and visualization, which then benefits all of our key stakeholders, internal and external. We return then to this analogy of an airport hub. Individuals that are now connected, streamlined, enhanced. The experience is forever changed. We will never travel again without understanding how this airport hub really transforms our journey. And in the same sense, we hope to do this with Project Cascade, transforming PCA's current data into a hub in which future technological changes will derive. Thank you, and we'd now like to open it up to questions.
All right, thank you, team, for your presentation. Allow me to just reset the timer, and we will dive right into the Q&A session. All right. There we go. All right, judges, you have 10 minutes to ask questions. You may now begin.
Thank you for the presentation. That was great. Question around using TIBCO as a data analytics repository or engine. Outside of analytics, were you able to see any opportunities around process integration, workflow integration as well? And does TIBCO answer those needs?
Just to clarify, so for process integration and workflow integration, do you mean like integrating with other software there, or what sort of processes and workflows?
Yes, between the systems. So other than the sharing of information, each system potentially can trigger downstream workflows in the overall operations of the business as well.
Yeah, so TIBCO has a number of tools for creating like event-driven data streams, and so those could be very useful there. Additionally, it has built-in integrations for a number of tools if they're adding other things in the future, and it can work with things like REST APIs and create its own APIs to drive that. But yeah, there's some event-driven tools that would be very useful for that.
Question on the cost, specifically as it relates to implementation. I feel like we went past that pretty quick on the 13 million. Can you break out where that manifests and how you're looking at implementation versus long-term ongoing costs?
Yes, absolutely. So we can look at a 5-year projected pro forma income statement. The costs are going to be both in costs of goods sold, which is going to be directly related to how the infrastructure is operating for those planes. That's obviously the sales here. And then there's SG&A. So that's going to be the back-end admin hardware costs. So you can see here, starting in 2024, that increase. We can also go to our cost structure, which should hopefully illustrate a little bit more where those costs are coming from and what they're going to be. The biggest ones here are going to be an increased R&D spend in the first few years. Currently, airlines are spending on average about 0.33% of their revenues on R&D. When you look at information technology firms, that's closer to 2%. So we believe increasing that R&D spend will actually help feasibly implement this. And so we'll increase it up to that 2% and then tailor it down from there. So that hopefully should kind of solidify our implementation and also ensure that there is enough spend to make it happen.
Got it. Just maybe one follow-up. Did I understand the timeline correctly? Year 1 is all about communication internal. Year 2 is about the actual work of standing up TIDCO as the middleware. Is that cut over at the end all at once? Are you linking all systems to all other systems at one point at the end of that second year?
Yeah, so we are doing the two biggest integrations we saw were between maintenance and operations and finance. And so those would be done by the end of year 2, which is kind of a big milestone for this project. But moving forward, we see this as a continuous opportunity for improvement to integrate into more of PCA's systems.
Good presentation. I have just a clarification. I thought I heard you say that you wouldn't be able to make decisions on the long-term applications roadmap until you really understand what all the data is in each of the current systems. I'm wondering how you make sure that you optimize the effort that you spend so that you don't end up integrating applications that will ultimately go away as you go through the process.
Yeah, so it's something we definitely thought about. And when we go to our software solution analysis, we can just kind of walk through what was important in making this decision. Firstly, in choosing, to buy a cloud software, it has a lot of the features that we were looking at. But specifically to answer your question, in terms of assuring there's no redundancy, the way we see the current landscape, it's kind of this black box. We don't even know if the redundancy is there because we don't have all the data in one place. And so yes, there may be some costs which we have accounted for in terms of IT downtime or maintenance while we kind of take inventory or take stock of what data is accessible, where we have it and where it's redundant. But we believe that in the long run, this will ensure that that never has to be done again and also provides enough information to make decisions regarding potential consolidation of some of those legacy systems.
I have a question. So during this phased integration, when you integrate TIBCO, because we have so many siloed systems that are not really talking to each other, have you considered the risk of parity between these two systems? And what kind of approach would you do in order to minimize the risk of inconsistent data between the two systems?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. First of all, Nikki talked about the guiding coalition before, and for that we would be bringing together people from all of the different data silos to really get a clear vision. Additionally, as you can see, so we talk about analyzing the existing APIs on both sides. So we would have the team that's working on maybe the operations integration and the team that's working on the maintenance integration. They're both going to talk to each other, figure out what should this new data setup look like, and then when we create those integrations, they're both going to use the same format for that.
Also, just a clarifying point, the guiding coalition consists of people that are currently working for PCA, whereas the additional employees that we're hiring to actually oversee the integration of the software is a different set of people.
One of the things that I saw, so you referenced 2.5 million in savings and a 15% ROI. I'm just curious, obviously when you integrate this data and you get rid of the kind of siloed data sets that exist, what are the biggest bang for your buck use cases that you would see out of this investment that contribute to the 2.5 million?
Absolutely. So when doing our research, there are a lot of airlines that have already integrated this. Dever mentioned one. That was in kind of this Air France KLM example. But there are other organizations such as JetBlue, which is using analytics. And Air Canada, I believe, is using some of these tools in order to streamline. We can also go to this demand study. This is really interesting. It was shown in a study done in the United States that increasing or decreasing the number of delay minutes actually shows a 6.1% increase in demand, right? So this is a cost savings that we haven't even factored in, but is potential. And we didn't factor it in because it's 8 million, right? If we showed you that number, I think that would be a bit of a shock. But this study has been proven. Customers are happy when their plane gets in on time. This is going to ensure that happens in a much better way.
I'll go for one more. Can you talk about a little bit more about TIBCO? So we're connecting systems and we're moving data across those systems. Have you thought a little bit about data duplication? And you mentioned all your data is in one place. I think this design has your data in many places, right? Can you talk a little bit about your thinking there?
Yeah, data duplication is definitely a risk, especially given the current state where we don't really know fully what the different data is in different places. And so at the start, there probably is actually going to be some data duplication where we're pulling in the same data from multiple locations, but that can actually be a benefit because we realize, hey, we have the same data in 2 different spots. We actually only need to use one of these as the source, and the rest can just pull it in from the existing location.
Okay, and who's doing that work?
Is going to be why we're hiring 5 people. In order to ensure this is implemented, we find it important to not necessarily take on consultants or have external hires doing this, but actually have internal people that are dedicated to the change management process as highlighted, that are going to be aligned and motivated to drive this insight forward because it is the company that they are working for, right? They have an additional motivation to make sure this happens.
I have one more question. So without knowing really exactly what kind of data it is and how to integrate it, how high do you see the risk that there is a delay in the integration of the project because of the complexity of it?
It definitely is possible that there would be some initial delays as well as the duplication like Deborah mentioned, but we see this as a very necessary path to take in order to reduce long-term technical debt. Because we need to, so it's been mentioned, right, we need to understand what the current situation is, where data is coming from, where is it redundant, what is it being used for, and what could it be used for. If we don't have that information, and there may be some delay, but it will be very worth it in the long run to standardize that data, to see what we actually need, and to have a team that lets us actually understand what we're working with.
One question here, and great presentation, by the way. I love those revenue projections. Going through this, obviously there was a focus on bringing all the data together. Is there any thoughts or was there any initial decisions that you think could be made, maybe in the architecture of the software itself, to either sunset some of those alphabet groups or try and achieve like consolidation? Was there any thoughts on that in your research?
Sure. So absolutely. You know, again, we looked at what is the data type, what is inputting into each of these systems, and based on what we could identify with the information provided, it's hard to say, right? You know, there's a lot of stuff going on in HR, but all of that may be necessary. And again, we considered some solutions. I think in-housing is very viable in the future because
Thank
it's so
you, team,
nuanced.
for your presentation, and to our judges for your insights and expertise. That is all for the Q&A period. Thank you. The next presentation will be starting at 2:15. If we could have everyone settle down. Thank you. We will be beginning a little shortly. So yeah, just get settled down, and we will begin with time slot 2.
You just go around and step on the stage.
This is the stage right here?
Yeah. You have one mic and just pass it.
So just up here?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, competitors, coaches, judges, and honored guests. Welcome to CaseIT 2024 Case 2 Final Presentations. For presentation time slot 2. My name is Aaliyah, and I will be your timer today. As a reminder, the CaseIT Organizing Committee will be recording the presentations for the purpose of the competition and team assessments. Now, before we begin, I would like to introduce some competition guidelines. You will have 15 minutes of protected time to present your solution. Judges are permitted to interrupt and ask questions by raising their hands during your presentation. There will also be a 10-minute designated Q&A period at the very end. At the conclusion of the Q&A period, competitors and judges will not be permitted to continue speaking. I will be using this device to time the presentations and Q&A period. I will also provide warnings at the 10-minute, 5-minute, 3-minute, and 1-minute mark. CaseIT's time will be the final time. Regardless, you are still responsible for keeping track of your own time. Please note that competitors are not permitted to reveal any affiliation with their university, country, or city of origin during or after the presentation. Thank you and all the best. Competitors, you may begin your presentation whenever you are ready.
Has anyone ever had their flight delayed 4 times and canceled at the very end because of a maintenance issue? I have. It was because of a lack of planning between their maintenance as well as their flight schedule. Good afternoon. My name is Perry, and with me today are my colleagues, Tiwa, Caitlin, and Ariana, and we are from Rowe Consulting. Today, PCA came to us with few key questions. One about system integration, the next about data flow connectivity. However, we believe that all of these issues can be formed into one main problem, which is the lack of system interoperability is hindering their ability to be responsive to the changing environment. Now, with our solution, enterprise architecture for PCA, it will be able to increase their decision-making speed, as well as maintaining employee satisfaction. Before we get there, let us take a look at where PCA is at currently. They are currently differentiating themselves by offering a unique flight destination route. However, there's an opportunity here for PCA to do more and to do better. Let us take a look at their ecosystem. It is complex and inefficient. Right now, manual processes are still being used for decision-making through Excel, and systems such as MMS are completely standalone, independent. And as PCA continues to grow, this ecosystem will continue to grow and diminishes the value of all the system in place. Now, let me pass it on to Ariana, where she will explore the aviation industry in Canada.
Thank you, Perry. There are a number of challenges in the aviation industry in Canada, one of the biggest being supply chain issues stemming from the pandemic. Another challenge is regulations. Regulations in Canada are constantly changing to adapt to changing customer needs. Another challenge is architectural debt. So when there are many isolated IS systems, this creates a risk of cyber threats. This is because there are many different attack points. Our research shows that competitors are mitigating these strategies through embracing a culture of change and agility. So Air Canada being one of them. Air Canada currently has the highest amount of market share at 70%. Another example is Virgin Australia Airlines, which was able to utilize an enterprise architecture strategy to help mitigate these challenges through increasing decision-making, reducing operation costs, and increasing operation efficiencies. So this leads us to our solution. We recommend PCA utilize an enterprise architecture strategy to create a unified and responsive IS architecture. We recommend using LeanIX, which is a SAP software, which will help with this transformation, as well as utilizing an enterprise architecture team. Now, so how does LeanIX work? LeanIX integrates IS systems through application programming interfaces. These APIs help to automatically integrate systems. Now, this is important for increasing real-time data and improving decision-making. So what is the benefit of utilizing LeanIX for PCA? Well, this helps with adapting to regulations through creating a scalable IS architecture. As well, LeanIX's AI assistant will help automate documentation, which will help facilitate the transition from using Excel for decision-making to using LeanIX's dashboards for decision-making. Now, with this transformation, there is an increased amount of data flow between systems, and this will require a data security strategy. I'll be passing it on to Tiwa, who will elaborate on this.
Thank you, Ariana. So this section of the solution will be talking about data protection. The introduction of an enterprise architecture strategy through LeanIX is going to solve the problem of data flow, having more data flow, and data being accessed in real time. But this means that sensitive data like traveling information, operational data, and employee data can easily be accessed by threat groups or individuals without authority. So as it stands, PCA needs to put in place the systems to protect its data pipeline, hence protecting its customers and employees. Before I dive into the functionalities of its technologies, it's important to note that businesses experience a 78% decrease in security breaches only after they implement a cybersecurity strategy. So we recommend PCA to be more proactive in acquiring technologies to protect that data pipeline before any security breaches can even take place. The implementation of the data access management system, this means it's going to limit data access to based on their jobs or job functionalities. So for example, HR will be able to have access to employee data, but not maintenance data. And this system is going to be very important because not only will it give access to data, it's also going to monitor and revoke data from the authorized users the moment it no longer serves value to them. Moving on, we're also going to be facilitating cybersecurity training for our employees, which will be facilitated by Dayforce. And it will include exercises like phishing tests to help raise awareness amongst our employees. Now, looking at trying to protect our data pipeline from external threats, we're going to be looking at what we recommend implementing a next-gen firewall, which will be monitoring the incoming and outgoing of data within the data pipeline. and enforcing security policies as well as blocking unauthorized users. Lastly, for extra protection, we recommend data encryption, which will be disguising the data, making it really hard for unauthorized users to understand or access this data. Now, I'm going to be passing on to Perry to talk about how to get
All right, thank you. So we recognize that employees in PCA is the heart of the business. So it's crucial that we get employees on board with this EA transformation. So with this change management, we recognize that we need employee engagement. They need to recognize the value that it will be provided to them through their day-to-day operation. Now, this value will be delivered through various channels, as we can see here. After employees understand the need of change, they need to understand what exactly will be changed. This is where our trainings will come in. Trainings will be operated through our HCM system, Dayforce. Training materials will be provided all about EAM and helping users understand the basics of enterprise architecture management. Once we have this factor, making it digestible for our employees, they're likely to be less resistant and be able to adapt to this change. Lastly, now employees understand why a change is needed and they understand what needs to be changed. A champion is important because this will help sustain our change. So a champion plays a crucial role as they support and encourage a culture of change and a culture of agility. They lead by example because whether the change is big or whether the change is small, seeing another person taking action to make changes in their day-to-day work life, it will heavily influence other employees to take action and adapt to this EA transformation. Now let me pass it on to Caitlin, where she will touch on our financials of this EA transformation.
Thank you, Perry. Now, as we get started, I'm sure you're wondering, this all sounds great, but how much is it going to cost me? Well, in the first year, it will cost approximately $6.5 million with a payback period of 85 days within that first year specifically. But in addition to that, there will be a reoccurring cost of about $1.2 million. That reoccurring cost is really important, as it is what will allow for us to ensure that there's continuous improvement and that PCA does not remain stagnant as they are operating their enterprise architecture strategy. Now, the next question I think you're probably wondering is, how is this going to save me money? Well, we believe that by utilizing an enterprise architecture system, that you'll be able to save $2.6 million in operational costs, and you will reach your break-even point if within 4 years, when the cumulative costs and cumulative savings equals about $10 million. Now, you're wondering next is, how are we going to do this? Well, we recommend a 6-year phased implementation with the launch in 2028 and with a 2029 and beyond post-implementation review. Now, there are several key points within our implementation that I would like to draw your attention to. The first point is during 2025 to 2026 when we're integrating the systems. This point is really important as it is what will ensure that data is being able to travel between systems effectively. Furthermore, we want to ensure that our employees have cybersecurity training and understand their role in data security since we are connecting the systems, our systems is only as strong as the weakest link. With that mindset in mind, we'll be conducting data security audits on a regular ongoing basis to ensure that we can find any vulnerabilities before an external threat does. Now, like Perry mentioned, employees are the heart of PCA. Therefore, we want to ensure that employees are engaged and involved throughout the entirety of the process. Therefore, we want to ensure a continuous improvement mindset by creating an employee loop to get employee feedback throughout the entire enterprise architecture strategy. Now, like any great plan, there are some risks associated. We believe that the number one risk is a data security breach. Since we are connecting the systems, we want to ensure that our data security is top-notch and that we are utilizing data encryption as well as user permissions and data firewalls to ensure that only authorized users are able to access the data. Now, we come back to Perry. Perry started us off telling us about her experience where she had 4 flights delayed before being canceled due to a maintenance issue on the plane. Well, by utilizing an enterprise architecture strategy, we believe that this can be avoided, as you will be able to better plan the flight scheduling and maintenance. Furthermore, utilizing an enterprise architecture strategy that leverages LeanIX as a tool will allow for improved decision-making, increased operational efficiency, and an improved customer experience. We thank you for your time and invite any questions that you might have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, team, for your presentation. Judges, you have 10 minutes to ask questions. You may now begin.
On one of your slides, it mentioned 85-day payback period, but then your roadmap for implementation was, I think, 6 years. And there was a couple of stats around ROI, so I just wanted to clarify what's the difference between that 85-day payback period versus the 267% ROI? Like, how do those two things relate?
Of course. So the payback period is calculated very specifically on the $6.5 million initial cost. We used, and then for the ROI, we looked at for the overall by year 6, so that's the difference there. Yes. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can you describe this 6-year timeline, where the bulk of that 6-year comes from?
Of course. So the 6-year implementation plan is broken down into 3 main phases. Our operational phase, as you see, the majority of that time is with enterprise architecture. One of the #1 reasons why enterprise architecture fails is because of poor planning. So we want to ensure that we're spending some time planning before we start actually implementing any of the enterprise architecture strategy or integrating our system. So that's what really starts us off. Yes.
I've got one. Can you share what the day-to-day experience is going to be like for field workers, for flight crews or maintenance crews, and how that changes from now till the future?
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question.
Thank you.
Of course. So the day-to-day operation won't necessarily change because of this EA transformation. So what they will be needing to adapt to the change is the strategy change. So they will be, the changes will be around the data, the location of the data, because currently the maintenance crew will go towards, where they usually get their data, and flight crew will get their data in another system that they have. So with this EA transformation, it will be able to integrate the systems together. That way, for a specific crew member, for example, maintenance crew, they will have a clearer access of data. For the flight crew and vice versa, the flight crew will have a clearer access to the maintenance crew data.
Okay, maybe just one quick follow-up. So in the future, are these crews going to a new application? Are they going to go to LeanIX or some version of that, or are they going to continue to use their existing systems they're using today?
Yeah, so they are going to continue using their existing system. So LeanIX essentially will just facilitate this EA transformation. Yeah. Thank you.
Sometimes the building of an enterprise architecture is seen as just a foundation stone. So once you've got the data, you've got a better understanding of your overall ecosystem. Have you thought about the costs of any process redesign or impacts to the business of what you learn from this new architecture? Because that could potentially change your financials significantly.
Of course. So for this instance, we'll look at the recurring costs. So that's part of the reason why we want to include a recurring cost is we recognize that, once the initial budget and the initial enterprise architecture strategy is in place, that there likely will have to be process changes and employee changes. So we looked at utilizing recurring costs to help mitigate for that if there are process changes and further training that needs to happen. Thank you.
You spend quite some time on talking about the change management process, especially when it comes to our employees, which is very nice. So what kind of strategies do you put in place in order to get this kind of buy-in that you're talking about, where you want to gain their buy-in so that they see the need for the change?
Thank you. That was a great question. So the change framework that we have in place, it's ADCAR. So we want to make sure that we raise the awareness of employees first. Now, like I mentioned earlier, the system the employee currently uses won't change, but employees need to understand the need to change and how that affects the entire business itself. So that is done through delivering values through a various communication tool and throughout the company. So after employees understanding the need of change, they will also be gone through training to understand what the change is exactly, because they are pilots, they're maintenance crew, they've worked in the aviation industry, so they don't necessarily understand why this transformation is crucial. So now that they've understand the need to change and understand what the change is, this is where champions come in. So champions will be able to sustain that change and make sure that everybody is comfortable with making that change in their day-to-day life, work life.
How does implementing Lean IX help with compliance with regulations?
Great question. So Lean IX is scalable through their APIs. So using a more traditional integration tactic, point-to-point integration, makes you have to constantly adapt and change those point-to-points. However, with utilizing APIs, it is automated. So Lean IX will automate these APIs to allow for changes in regulations and changes in technologies if a new IS system is added as well.
Another question I have in regards to change management, I really liked how you guys brought up all the need for employee buy-in. I just wanted to confirm, was the recommendation for the president to be the head of the change management for this?
So sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, for the overseeing the implementation of this project, who was the recommended staff member to oversee this? From Pacific Coastal?
Yeah, so I believe Caitlin will be will have a better answer.
Of course. So I have a couple of answers, things I would like to say to that question. So first of all, yes, from our understanding, the president really likes and enjoys being involved in all the day-to-day and overseeing all the operations of Pacific Coastal Airlines, so he will be involved in the process. However, we are planning to utilize champions throughout the entire process to be able to reinforce that change throughout the entire organization.
Okay, and just one follow-up, just to make sure I understand. The champions, are they internal, the organization?
Yes.
And is there any concerns with having a variety of champions from inside the company be involved in a project of this scale over a 6-year implementation on top of maybe just their current core function or other parts of their job?
Of course. So we believe that the importance of having champions is that they will be able to help lead the change throughout the organization. They really know their roles best on the lower ground level, right? So that's why we want them involved. In regards to their day-to-day operations, there may have to be some adjustments to how they're spending their time. Obviously, this will be a time commitment for them. However, we do believe that the long-term benefit for decision-making as well as operational efficiencies for implementing an enterprise architecture strategy will outweigh those benefits in the long run.
Seeing that you're using all our existing technology and then but putting this new enterprise technology on it, do you have any strategies to deal with technology debt, where maybe our old in-house developed systems may not be able to serve your system?
Yes, absolutely. So right now, we are more focused towards architectural debt. However, in the long run, we do believe that NIX will help reduce redundancies with systems, and those legacy systems will eventually can eventually be taken out. However, currently, because employees are used to using these legacy systems and change will take a long time to implement, we believe having a parallel phased implementation where we have legacy systems as corresponding with this EA system is the best course of action for the current position. Thank you.
Are those all the questions for the team?
In 30 seconds or less, can you describe the milestones that happened in that long 6-year period? What are the major activities in terms of feedback loops as to how things are going? 6 years is a long time.
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
All right, well. Yeah. All right, well, thank you, team, for your presentation. Judges, you have 10 minutes. Sorry. Thank you, team. And thank you to our judges for your insights and expertise. Thank you. We will begin the next presentation in a few minutes, just to let the judges get settled in.
Okay. So can we still say hi to them? We can still go, right? Okay. We don't want to get Thank you. We won't talk about things. Thank you.
Yes, so if everyone could please return back to your seats, we'd like to carry on with the presentations. Thank you. Once again, please settle down as we'd like to begin the next presentation. All right, good afternoon, competitors, coaches, judges, and honored guests. Welcome to CaseIT 2024, Case 2 Final Presentations for presentation time slot 3. My name is Aaliyah, and I will be your timer today. As a reminder, the CaseIT Organizing Committee will be recording the presentations for the purpose of the competition and team assessments. Now, we are all excited to see your presentation. If I could have time slot 3 make your way to the stage. Before we begin the presentation, we'd like to go over a couple presentation guidelines. So you will have 15 minutes to present your solution. Judges are permitted to interrupt and ask questions by raising their hands during your presentation. There will also be a 10-minute designated Q&A period at the very end. At the conclusion of the Q&A period, competitors and judges will not be permitted to continue speaking. I will be using this device to time the presentations and Q&A period. I will also provide warnings at the 10-minute, 5-minute, 3-minute, and 1-minute mark. CaseIT's time will be final time. Regardless, you are still responsible for keeping track of your time. Please note that competitors are not permitted to reveal any affiliation with their university, country, or city of origin during or after the presentation. Thank you and all the best. Competitors, you may now begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
We are living in an increasingly connected world, and aviation is no different in that. Whether on the tarmac or in the cockpit, connectivity allows for new dimensions in terms of flight efficiency, operation efficiency, and comfort. Today, with Next Gen Consulting, our team formed of Félix, Anne-Claire, François, and myself, Etienne, are going to lead your company to be the leader of the Next Gen. Indeed, we have the mandate to help you gain strategic advantage by optimizing IT systems through key integration point and data flow. By considering key elements such as where to innovate in PCA's digital ecosystem, how to ensure successful IT integration, and what are the different opportunities for growth, our recommendation is Cruise, a software solution using machine learning to optimize your digital ecosystem. Impacts $6.7 million in NPV, but more importantly, 12.7 million tons in CO2 reduction. We'll start by boarding with our analysis and then take off with our strategy. Flight will be our implementation, and we'll have a soft landing with the impacts.
So we can start boarding by going through the key strategic consideration that we have today. So there was a need for interconnectivity, achieving operational excellence, then a seamless importance for data flow, and then expansion ambition. So what is the key assessment we need to do with those considerations is that there is a need for optimizing the current digital ecosystem. But why?
So we know that the HR labor shortage has affected you and the entire industry deeply. But what we understand by looking at your current digital landscape is that it won't be the administrative HR systems that will help you solve this problem. So we need to focus on systems that have added value activities and that align with your key considerations and priorities. Within these systems, we'll be able to come and help with this labor issue because by optimizing, your operations. And so these are the systems with the most strategic importance for Pacific Coastal Airlines. In terms of what are the opportunities within these systems, we can see that there is opportunity to increase interconnectivity and optimize flight planning. So the need for optimization is the strongest in your passenger service system, the maintenance management system, and that's where we can have the most impact quickly and add value.
So let's run you down. Let's do a rundown of what are the key ways to optimize your current digital landscape. So we had to think about taking the status quo, digital twins, AI-powered analytics, and also improving your ERP. So as Mr. Mock, your CIO, has highlighted, there's a trend for predictive maintenance in the aviation industry. So how this new trend is appearing, it's by automated inspection, AI-powered. So we know that maintenance in aviation industry represents as much of 10 to 20% of aircraft operational costs, which is a big amount. And then the programs for maintenance optimization are much needed to adapt to this fast-moving industry. To do so, we have to look for reduced downtime, maximizing resources, and increasing efficiency. So that's why those three are doing a big impact of the daily operations that you have at Pacific Coastal.
It is no surprise that digital solutions are expensive, but if we focus on the status quo, not doing anything, not updating your system, it has a big opportunity cost. And when we look at feasibility, if we focus on AI-powered analytics, we know that you have the capabilities internally to delve in this area, and it's also a really easy integration to your current ecosystem. When we look at the long term, keeping a growth mindset, the status quo won't be enough to feed your growth expansion. And so what we can conclude is that the optimization of present system with AI-powered analytics is the most strategic and realistic solution.
So let's now take off with our strategy. Cruise, a software solution using machine learning to optimize your digital ecosystem. It is with seamless data flow and interconnecting key systems that we're going to be able to optimize operations and drive value, all in all, to support expansion and give strategic recommendations. So now, let's cruise through our implementation.
First of all, you need to create some time value data. In order to do that, you need an air-to-ground system transmitter that will allow you to access those data in real time. Then, this transmitter is based on a 4G connectivity, so it is light, which is, because we know weight is a big concern for you when we're talking about aircraft. Then, to connect those data from the sensors to your internal system, you need to make the use of APIs. Currently in the market, there's a lot of APIs that are doing the job that are available to do so. And the data also will be connected to your maintenance management system. Then Cruise, your machine learning, will be able to get those data through an API also.
So, what are Cruise's objectives in terms of real-time data and MMS? Well, it is firstly to optimize maintenance schedule, to also allow for autonomous performance monitoring, and finally, to prevent mechanical failures.
Now, how is Cruise actually going to take form? Well, we're looking at 3 different development steps. But what's really important in those steps is to engage your employees. So we need to consult them on the key metrics that Cruise should have, because they are experts in their fields, and we should listen to their inputs on this information. It's also really important to explain to them how the machine learning is coming up with these conclusions, because if they don't trust Cruise, they won't use it, and so we won't get the value that we want out of it. It's also really important to test the design of the dashboard with them, since again, they are the end users. In terms of key metrics, we have a few suggestions for you. So the percentage of aircrafts in maintenance, fault detection rate, and downtime variation. These key metrics are not valuable if the design of the dashboard isn't intuitive and simple for your employees.
Now look realistically how Cruise will help your system. So it will be able to build a better maintenance schedule, looking to pinpoint maintenance need from the real-life data, and also looking at your maintenance schedule history and your inventory. It will also help you to have a performance monitoring on live that will help you notify when something has happened, and also to build a predictive model to help you prevent abnormal events, and so to help you do some preventive maintenance, lowering your maintenance costs.
So what are the key advantages of implementing Cruise's machine learning into your maintenance management system? So we're looking at a decrease of in-flight failure, a decrease of downtime, and then an increase in service level. The case study for that is Southwest. By implementing AI, they've been able to have an increase in accuracy of their maintenance by 95%. So with the implementation of Cruise, you'll be able to With the implementation of Cruise, you'll be able to quickly assess defects, minimizing risk, and manage timely repairs with your employees. The Southwest success story is a real case study to follow for you PCA because it shows that you could benefit from your need of innovation and growth.
Now let's look how Cruise will be inserted into your internal system. So they will be inserted into your maintenance management system, your passenger service system, and your revenue management system, all through APIs. And how that will be able to do so, we know you have the internal capability of building those APIs, looking already at your system Crew Pay.
So now, what are the Cruise's objectives in terms of PSS and revenue management? Well, it is first to optimize flight schedules with on-time arrival and fuel efficiency, but as well, maximizing pricing with automatic demand predictions.
Once again, the deployment is going to use the same 3 key steps. And in terms of metric, we're proposing on-time performance, fuel consumption, and a variation of selling prices. We do have other suggestions if ever you're curious.
Now, Cruise, in terms of PSS and revenue management, will be able to build a better flight schedule by cross-referencing your maintenance schedule with your current flight schedule. In the revenue management, so currently, you can't move and modify your price based on the forecasted demand, but with Cruise, your forecasted demand will be more efficient and precise, and you'll be able to add some other inputs into the pricing model, such as maintenance variable costs.
So once again, what are the key advantages of implementing Cruise's machine learning into your PSS system? So we're looking at a decrease in fuel consumption, a decrease in CO2 emission as well, but a decrease in downtime and an increase in on-time arrival, which means more happy customer, which means fidelity from them, and then more money at the end. So the case study for that is Alaskan Airlines, who had implemented AI in order to shave an average of 2.7 minutes per flight and an average of 7,000 tons of CO2 emission. How does it implement for cruises? It's going to save you times for flight, so more on-time arrival, and then we're forecasted at 12.7 million tons of CO2 saved.
So now, how to ensure a successful deployment? This really goes with testing. So it will allow us for continuous improvement to reinforcement training. There's 2 different tests we want to do. So of course, user acceptance with your employee, because once again, they will be using the design, the dashboard, so the design has to be intuitive. The second type of testing we want to do is real world. So we want to test for your 2 most frequent routes. So from Vancouver to Victoria and from Vancouver to Powder River. So we'll test the real live data streams on both of these different routes.
So here a roadmap of your next few steps. But what you need to remember of this is you need a smooth integration of data. You need to be able to track your progress properly. And most importantly, you need your employees to get on board on the project, and you need them to be engaged throughout the process.
So now, let's have a smooth landing with our impacts. Gross profit is positive by 2026 and should reach $5 million by 2030. What are the key revenues and costs of implementing this strategy? Well, it is $4 million in cost to implement the air-to-ground solution and $1 million per year in cost to maintain, all in all, creating $8 million in additional revenues generated yearly. If we look at NPV, it's around $6.7 million by 2030. In terms of net profit margin, by having key assumptions of 1% fuel savings in the first year and additional 0.25% over each year, a 3% in cost reduction for predictive maintenance, and 0.5% in increased accuracy in price adjustment, we can see how net margin becomes increasingly bigger as we implement Cruise. Not only is it profitable, it is also sustainable. CO2 emission reduction by 2030 should account to around 280,000 less cars on the road or 7 million trees planted. But beyond the numbers, implementing Cruise is increased safety, improves customer satisfaction, and has a stronger employee engagement. We know it. Passengers want top quality services. Management wants operations efficiency, and employees wants facilitated processes. Well, by having reduction of delays, cost savings, and tailored dashboards, we're creating a strategic alignment between our key stakeholders.
It's important to keep our values close. So what is the impact on people? We're offering a safer flight experience for passengers, but we're also creating more fulfilling jobs for employees because they will now be able to focus on real added value tasks. In terms of the planet, we are contributing to the global efforts to reduce CO2 emissions, and it just so happens that this is also very cost efficient for Pacific Coastal Airlines. This will also enable to have an enhanced financial sustainability that will be able to propel you for your growth prospects.
When dealing with artificial intelligence, you need to be able of some risk and mitigation. It can be a confidentiality, biases and discrimination, or again, it could be a lack of accountability and transparency. So to mitigate those risks, you need to be able to write such policies and plan and to set some objective KPIs to continually evaluate those.
So we are demanded to help you gain strategic advantage by optimizing IT systems through key integration points and data flow. By considering status quo, digital twins, and improved ERP, the most impactful strategy is Cruise, a software solution using machine learning to optimize your digital ecosystems. Not only the impacts $6.7 million in NPV, but more importantly, 12.7 million tons in CO2 reduction, putting Pacific Coastal Airline on the map for efficiency, sustainability, and security. We are Next Gen Consulting, and we're now ready for your questions.
Thank you, team, for your presentation. Judges, you have 10 minutes to ask questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I did like the taking off pieces. That was excellent. Couple of questions for you. The technologies that you're recommending are all early stage, so things like digital twins, AI. You presented an implementation plan, but I'm interested to know some of the milestones and the approach, a bit more detail on how you will implement these technologies and how you'll adjust if they don't respond in the field quite the way that you'd hoped, because we're not talking about customers here, we're talking about aircraft. So how will you adjust?
If I can start maybe and give you afterward the answer. If we go to our longer roadmap, so we are trying to implement the strategy firstly in 2 routes on 2 planes in the first year. And it increases to 2 planes and 3 planes over the years so that we are able to mitigate risk and adjust if necessary. Maybe my colleague can add a little bit more on the entire process.
Thank you. So about the technology that you talk about, there are some previous cases that are here on the market. For example, the air-to-ground satellite onboard network is a product that is already viable and selling right now. So as my colleague said, it will be through the years. We're not talking about implementing right away all of it, but through the years, and it's on phases. So first of all, it will be implemented Cruise on your MMS, and then on your PSS, and then on your revenue management as well, not all at the same time.
Can you share a little bit more on the implementation and how you're going to break that down, both upfront implementation costs and then ongoing additional operational costs to support?
Absolutely. So if we can maybe go to CapEx and OpEx. So capital expenditure, putting the technology on the plane, it's around $250,000 per air-to-ground. We also have operational costs that are calculated throughout the process. It costs around $56,000 to develop the AI. All in all, revenues and expenses are positive by 2026, so we are investing a bit more in the early stage by having a bit more OpEx and CapEx along the way. But does that answer your question?
It does, yeah, thank you. I'm just curious then, all the work is going to be done by staff? Is that new staff being brought on or with a partner of some kind?
We've added staff into our revenue schedule. We haven't looked at partners. We haven't pinpointed a partner, let's say. We know some different partners, that are known for doing this around Canada, but we haven't pinpointed a partner. We did include the cost in our schedule, though.
Nice presentation. I'm just curious, what would you say is the biggest point of uncertainty if we were to invest in something like this?
Well, I definitely think that first off would be all of the different data points that we're adding to your current system. So it is quite heavy, and we all know that when you add a link, you do add heaviness to your whole system. So I think that would be the most prominent liability, and that really goes in how we're going to be able to build the data architecture and the data lineage in order to make sure that it doesn't weigh too heavy on your current system. But again, once you're since you're not housing all of this in-house, at least all of the weight of this extra data isn't on you, but there will probably be additional costs and everything to having this big amount of data.
Loved your guys' presentation. I thought you had a really good understanding too of our maintenance needs currently. And I also liked how you brought in a lot about sustainability, improved safety KPIs, so thank you for that. I just want to make sure I understand Cruise a little bit better. Do I have a correct understanding that Cruise is, it takes data from our current systems and uses machine learning to make better outputs, is that right? Or is there any parts where it's actually a new system altogether for any of our components?
I can maybe answer part of that, and perhaps one of my colleagues will take the relay. But so with the air-to-ground system, we're adding this onto the plane, and so through APIs, we're able to get real-time data. Because currently, you have historical data. Once the plane lands, you can have access to the data, but while it's in flight, there's no access to real-time data. So what we're adding is access to that real-time data that is then added on with the machine learning.
And for your current architecture, your MMS, PSS, and revenue management, as long as your ERP, they are all staying the same. So you're keeping your architecture, and as my colleague said, your data are being stored in clouds. So with Cruise, all the data will also be stored in cloud. So you don't need to rechange all your enterprise architecture. But it's only adding the machine learning that will be able, through APIs on the cloud, to be able to do that. So you don't need to have in-house servers, if I understand well your questions.
Yeah, that's great. And just one follow-up, just to make sure I understand. So lots of talk about like improving the efficiency we get from not having aircraft being down and stuff through the air-to-ground and Cruise. Where is the $8 million in additional revenue coming from?
Maybe we can go to the revenue schedule with Cruise. So we've understood and forecasted revenues from Pacific Coastal Airline through the different routes and the average ticket price. And we forecasted your revenues with the current airline industry forecast, let's say. So by implementing Cruise, you are reducing downtime, you are having less fuel, you're having fuel savings, and you're also are able to predict price and adjust prices more accordingly and not inflate them, but have a better pricing. So these are all key points that are helping net profit margins, gross profit, all in all generating $8 million a year in revenue.
You were mentioning to monitor some KPIs to prevent something like a bias of the machine learning system. So what strategies do you want to put in place in order to make sure that the data that is going into the machine learning model is clean, and that you have data points on the way so that you can ensure that there is no bias in there or anything like that?
Yeah, of course. So I think with the bias, it's important to, once we have implemented this device on your different planes, the data sets that come from like just having one route will be diminished as the AI grows. In terms of quality data, it will really be done in the architecture of the data lineage. As we see, there's a few steps that for us are key in order to make sure that we have quality data going in, and it's not just any data. So really making sure that the data pipeline to avoid duplicates and make sure that there's a data integrity reinforcement. Probably that you guys already have a team on place that does data quality, and if you don't, it would be an addition that we would propose, because that data needs to be accurate, consistent, valid, and unique in order for it to be valuable.
Do you have an estimate for ongoing costs to keep Cruise running?
ongoing costs, so cost to maintain, let's say, crews, it's $1 million a year. Yeah.
Is that internal staffing costs, or is that partner costs? Is that cloud infrastructure costs? It's all.
It is all calculated within this $1 million. We can break it down furthermore if you want to, but they are costs to develop the software, update it, and whatever. Like, yeah, that answered your question. Sorry about the.
Yep, it's all in.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You mentioned that there's easy integration of the AI-enabled systems to the existing systems. I'm just curious what drove that conclusion.
Yeah, so when saying easy integration, we're talking about, sorry, I'll go a bit in front. We're talking about AI that's being developed since the last year. There's a lot of APIs that were that now are out there to integrate those machine learning or generative AI in some cases into your internal system. So there's a knowledge that's being developed right now in the market from the last few years. So it's increased the easiness to plug in.
Also, just to add, just by the fact that most of your data is on cloud already makes it more easy to add on our system.
Any further questions from the judging panel? All right. Thank you, team, for your presentation, and to our judges for your insights and expertise. We will now be entering a 15-minute break, so please return after the 15 minutes. Thank you.
Wait, is that timer 20 minutes or 15?
It's 15. So, Q&A is 10 minutes. But we'll go over. Yeah. I'm just gonna get people to wrap up things. I'm just gonna come up here to wrap up their conversations, right?
15? How did it 15?
It's until 2:25.
No,
So.
no, but like.
Oh, sorry for the presentation. Yes, it's been 15 minutes.
Why did it get cut? We didn't know we got cut.
Sorry, it's always.
On the rule book, it's 20 minutes plus 10.
Well, from what I know, the instructions have been for 15 minutes presentation and 10-minute Q&A.
10-minute Q&A?
10-minute Q&A, yes.
It's fine. We can hit 15. Do the normal thing. Just normal prices. Do normal presentation.
Okay.
Don't do your bells and whistles.
No issue. No. All good?
Do we get 2 mics or we just get 1?
I believe it's 1, just to kind of make it easier to maintain the background.
Can we all? Oh, actually no. She wants to stand here, right? To click the thing.
You do have a clicker, so you can move.
No, at the end. At the end. Yeah. Okay, so we all stand down there. Then at the end, I'll move up here to do the. Yeah.
It's up here. Yeah.
Then which screen do we point to?
Because otherwise you won't be in screen of the film. So I'm just gonna make a quick announcement if you don't mind.
If we could begin to wrap up our conversations and make our way back to the tables, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So I will be up here to. I'm just gonna do another.
Yeah.
And then just before I head on stage, I'm gonna plug in the HDMI for you. Either you can start off here, or you can. I can introduce you.
Go up.
Okay.
Wait, it's running up on the mic test. Is it this one? Yeah, pull it up. Hello? Testing 1, 2, 3. My voice sounds beautiful. Testing 1, 2. Oh, it's closer. Testing 1, 2, 3. You have to be pretty much like into it.
All right, so once again, we will be starting very soon. If everyone could grab their seat and await the presentation. Thank you. Good afternoon, competitors, coaches, judges, and honored guests. Welcome to CaseIT 2024 Case 2 Final Presentations for presentation time slot number 4. My name is Aaliyah, and I will be your timer for today. As a reminder, the CaseIT Organizing Committee is recording the presentations for the purpose of the competition and team assessments. Now, without further ado, we are excited for your presentation. Time slot 4, please make your way to the stage. All right. Before we begin, we would like to remind competitors of the presentation guidelines. You will have 15 minutes of protected time to present your solution. Judges are permitted to interrupt and ask questions by raising their hands during your presentation. There will also be a 10-minute designated Q&A period at the very end. At the conclusion of the Q&A period, competitors and judges will not be permitted to continue speaking. I will be using this device to time the presentations and the Q&A period. I will also provide warnings at the 10-minute, 5-minute, 3-minute, and 1-minute mark. CaseIT's time will be the final time. Regardless, you are still responsible for keeping track of your time. Please note that competitors are not permitted to reveal any affiliation with their university, country, or city of origin during or after the presentation. Thank you, and all the best. Competitors, you may begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pacific Coastal Airlines has a grand vision to create a future where communities are connected and enriched, supported and embraced. But to make this into a reality, there's a few questions we must ask. The first is, how are our information systems currently connected in order to support our operations? The second is, are our decisions that we're currently making truly enriching the work experience of employees and customers? And last but not least, are we truly supporting and embracing our customers, our employees, and all members of our team? In order to turn that vision into a reality, we want Pacific Coastal Airlines to leverage and win on information technology, keenly focused on the turnaround time. Under the status quo, we see that Pacific Coastal wants to provide the best-in-class regional airline service for British Columbia. But the turnaround time is the biggest barrier to that. It is both a huge cost center and decreases both employee and customer satisfaction. So we want to win on IT in 3 fronts. The first is creating a unified data system to integrate all of our current information systems. The second is leveraging the technology of digital twins, and all of that will feed into our employee-facing Turn-It app. This whole thing will take 3 years to implement over the course of 3 phases and have a net present value of $16 million over the 5 years. But let's start with the now. The value proposition that PCA is offering is best in class in British Columbia, and that means excellent customer experience and great operations efficiency. We can do that through maximizing our flight availability, decreasing our delays, and making sure our maintenance is run on schedule. And to prove to you that our digital solution is the best, our goal today is to make sure that the digital solution we recommend is truly supporting everything that PCA wants to do. So, where does PCA's IT currently sit? Well, we currently sit in the factory mode, which means that we have a high dependence on IT for our operations, but we're not using it to a strategic advantage. We want to move us to that strategy point where we are using it for a strategic advantage. But the reason we can't quite leverage that right now is because we're missing 2 key links. If you take a look at our current data stack, we see that the link between the maintenance management system and the passenger service system is missing. We also see the link missing with crew and planning and scheduling. So the problem here is that inaccurate maintenance scheduling, all of this creates inaccurate maintenance scheduling, inefficient labor usage, regulatory compliance concerns, and makes us have essentially KPIs that we don't want to see. So we need a unified data layer that can support all of this and collect all our information in one spot. But because we don't have this, we see that PCA is lagging behind other industry leaders. Well, Sean, who are our current industry leaders?
Thanks, Sherry. Let's look at how other competitors are currently leveraging tech to increase the competitive advantage. On your left, we have KLM with an integrated decision-making platform that allows them to reduce the delay minutes by at least 20%. On our right, we have a Lufthansa live turn management app that allowed and empowered their staff to not only get their status faster, but also faster turnaround as well. With that in mind, we've mapped out 10 different pathways PCA can take. But now the question is, these are all great opportunities, but how do we prioritize them? Let's look at their cost structure. PCA, from labor all the way to food and beverages, you can notice that labor and fuel makes up more than 50% of the total operating expenses. The question is why? Let's look at the key driver behind fuel. Essentially, flight delays lead to not only crew rebooking, but also crew overtime pay, whereas fuel is usually due to the fact that predictive maintenance is not being used, and therefore our engines and our parts are not well maintained. With that in mind, these two feed directly into something called turnaround time, or TAT for short. With that in mind, therefore, we've decided to really focus on flight delay analysis, as well as a predictive maintenance model to make sure that we can capture these 2 root causes and decrease turnaround time as a result. But before we get there, Nick, how do we fix these missing data links?
For sure. So looking into our current and missing data links, what we need is a unified data layer. What does that mean? Well, fundamentally, when we look at PCA's current tech stack, 75% of it is cloud-based SaaS platforms, while the other 25% are web-based, which means that our solution, using ePaaS, also known as Integration Platforms as a Service, is the best way to connect these systems. It is actually 73% cheaper to the nearest solution, ERPs, which we didn't actually choose because they required you to consolidate your data all in one spot and were much more operationally complex than the use cases we needed. So, in that case, what is iPaaS? iPaaS, simply put, connects one of your softwares to many others. It has 3 key components that will help us drive value. First, the ability to transform data between point A to point B in the right format so we can leverage it. It also allows us to automate and orchestrate key workflows so we're able to let our employees work on what truly matters. And finally, it allows us to integrate systems in real time so we can become a more data-driven business. So now we know we wanted to use iPaaS. What vendor should we choose? Here we've outlined 5 key decision criteria, but the top 3 are the most important, that being security, integration, and the ability to have good user experience. As a result, we chose to use MuleSoft. So what does our ending tech stack actually look like? Well, our architecture looks a bit more like this. Now, let's say the ERP system wants to know a little bit more about maintenance so they can create an advanced depreciation schedule. It will request information from MuleSoft, and then they will, as an event-driven platform, they'll request information for a maintenance MMS system. And as a result, we'll get information that drives value in our ERP system. This solution is both accurate, scalable, agile, and finally, secure. All right, how do we implement this? We understand it takes time. The first couple months are going to be focused on planning, assessing, and figuring out key problems we need to solve. From then, we're going to move on to the developing and deploying, and finally, we're going to train key personnel on how to use this data and how to use these platforms, because we understand using a new software is incredibly difficult. Sorry. Now we have a unified data layer. Sean, can you tell us how we can leverage that?
For sure. Let's dive into it. So as you can see on the screen, this is an industry benchmark of turnaround time across airlines. We have Delta all the way to JetBlue. You may have flown one of them in your time here. But I want to point you to the industry average of 14%. What this represents is the differential between on-schedule turnaround time and delayed turnaround time, which also equates to an opportunity for PCA to capture. With this 14%, we're able to not only reduce turnaround time cost, we're able to uplift revenue, but research also shows that for every % reduction in turnaround time, we're able to uplift 0.75% in customer satisfaction. So happier customers. With that being said, where are we currently? According to OAG, which is the leading data solutions for aviation in the States, we're currently in number 2, which is smart visibility. What we want is to get to number 3, advanced systems, integrating both AI decision-making, but also full data integration. So therefore, introducing digital twin, the next step in PCA's innovation. You may be wondering, what is a digital twin? Well, essentially, it's a virtual replica of an asset or a system that's fed with real-time and historical data to simulate different scenarios. So on the screen here is 5 potential scenarios and how we can simulate it on the right with a predictive element. We have now ground that down and kind of categorized in 2 key use cases. The first is aircraft maintenance, and the second is ground crew operations maximizing. With that in mind, before we dive into the impact of these predictive models, let's look at which vendor should we choose. We suggest IBM Watson X as the digital twin provider for a couple key reasons. The first is that it ranks highest overall across its competitors. The second, it ranks highest in both vendor ecosystem as well as integration capabilities. Vendor ecosystem basically meaning that as we scale, we can add more services, and ecosystem means that we can blend that with our SaaS as well as web-based solutions very well. So let's dive into the demonstration here. Imagine you have a simulation. It runs up to millions or multi-millions scenarios to optimize for example, baggage processes, refueling, and finding out the best way to do something, i.e. reducing costs and reducing time it takes. And from there, we can implement the system in real life with our ground crew and allow us to capture that benefit. As well, with the data available from the system, our execs can make better decisions going forward and more strategic decisions going forward. So this, although very complex, I'll walk us through this. Essentially, this is a map of how the impact of time saved will apply to, for example, a flight from Kelowna to Nanaimo. Let's look at 2 key metrics. The first is operating profit in blue. The second is the turnaround cost in orange. By saving 10 minutes in turnaround, we're able to uplift revenue up to 67% and reduce turnaround cost by around 9.5%. This is thanks to an 8% uplift in aircraft utilization, as a study done by Boeing. That all sounds great, but that's not the end. This is the second use case of predictive maintenance model. Imagine you can really maintain and really understand what parts of your aircraft needs updating or maintaining. So for example, the tire, the weight, or the engine. With this in mind, we're able to really maximize fuel efficiency and save on that cost, so we don't have to essentially make these parts go past the lifetime it's supposed to. And this is the kind of impact of DT, up to $2 million. And therefore, with the turnaround time, we're able to kind of unlock the 1%, the 4%, and the 0.75. And when combined with the turnaround time cost savings, we're able to uplift to up to $2.2 million with this solution. Now, with the in terms of implementing the IBM Digital Twin, it takes around 12 months to launch, with around 20 weeks of development to not only map our key processes, but also to build the twin itself. That all sounds pretty good. But Sherry, with these tools, how does it actually help our employees?
That is an awesome question, Sean. And we want to introduce you to the Turnaround Management app. At this point, I invite you to pull up your phones, take a look at the QR code, and follow along with our live demo. Of course, if you don't have your phone easily accessible, that's no problem. I'll also be displaying things on screen. So, if you open the Turn It app as an employee on your mobile device, you'll be greeted with a personal dashboard where you can see your own schedule. But wait, this is very complicated. I'm not too sure what to do, you may think. No problem. We have in-app tutorial training to make sure that transition is seamless for employees onboarding. Then, someone, in the current state, people who are working for PCA may say, hey, there's a delay and I don't have any transparency into it. However, that's why we have live cross-crew updates. With our unified data systems, we can now have ground crew directly communicating with our flight crew and our gate crew to keep passengers informed of things like baggage delays. Now, you might be wondering, what is the best use of my time right now, maybe as a ground crew member? And so, take a look at my tasks. This is a real-time scheduler that allows you to optimize your day based on our digital twin technology. We'll be telling you exactly what you should be doing in the moment to speed up turnaround. So, for someone like Andrea is incentivized to use this because under the status quo, she's not paid for time on the ground. So with the Turn It app, she can plan to arrive at the airport based on any delays that she's seeing in the flights that she's involved in. Then, during a delay, Andrea can see what is the best thing I can do to turn this around. She can also let customers know why a turnaround is happening, improving the customer service experience. On the back end, digital twin technology and our unified data is going to be helping improve the process and speed things up on the ground as well. So Andrea's unpaid time is minimized and her ability to help her customers and herself is maximized. So the Turn It app will take 8 months to launch, and we're happy to dive deeper into this with our comprehensive timeline. So these are all great tools. But Nick, the question is, what is the impact for Pacific Coastal?
For sure. Now, for the most exciting part of the presentation, financials. So, in the next 5 years, we're hoping to see a 16 million net present value at a 12% discount rate. As you can see here, in our first year, we're actually going to see a net loss. This is due to the fact that a lot of these implementations are very costly to start up. That includes things like implementation costs that are one-time uses. However, starting from 2025 onwards, we're able to unlock both the cost savings and the revenue boost from decreasing turnaround time. What does this mean in a quantitative sense? This means that by 2028, we're able to have each year a cost savings of $8.5 million. What does this mean for our bottom line? Well, that means our bottom line goes from an operating margin of 2.5% to an industry-leading operating margin of around 5%. This represents a 192% growth in our operating profit to $8.5 million. So, you may be asking, Nick, this is a great solution and all, but how do we get executive buy-in? Well, we've outlined here some key risks. We understand that every solution comes with risks, and we have to mitigate them. For instance, the CTO may say, hey, data might be lost during transfer. How do we work with that? Well, if I can point you to A1, we mitigate this by working with best-in-breed solutions, for instance, IBM and MuleSoft. At the end of the day, Sherry told you at the beginning of this presentation that we have a vision. How do we get to this vision? Well, we want a future where communities are connected by our unified data layer. They are enriched by our digital twin simulation, and they're supported by our IT turnaround management app. So, I invite you guys to buckle in and help us transform our vision into a reality. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you, team, for your presentation. Judges, you have 10 minutes to ask questions. You may now begin.
The unified data layer, that is the piece that kind of ties all the underlying data together. Using an iPaaS platform, how do you address any of the systems that don't necessarily have a up-to-date API to access data from?
So if we go to our expense schedule, we actually built out, we had a portion of our money dedicated to implementation and also hiring experts from MuleSoft. We understand that a lot of these connectors are going to be unique, so building from one system to another might be difficult. But we've allotted, I think, $200,000 in total to work on that, so it's something we've considered in our analysis.
Thank you again for the presentation. That was great. How do you relate the solution for reducing the turnaround time with your integration there to our strategic initiatives and plan? So what?
Yeah, so we can look into, if I understand correctly, how do we actually communicate that with our partners to get this done?
No, it's more, we have our current corporate strategic plan, and I wonder where that fits in.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense. So we go back to kind of the value prop of PCA in the first place. We want to be the best-in-class regional service in BC. Right? We break that down very clearly through kind of the decision tree here. But what I'm going to do now is kind of walk you through how these three bottom lines kind of incorporates into our solution. So first is kind of the maximize flight availability, and that's done through through minimizing delays, usually caused by, for example, let's say we don't know when to maintain these parts as of currently. That might cause delays of a flight. Secondly, for example, with overall delays of these things, it also usually equates to not only transparency or usually at the time, like crew rebooking, so therefore it takes time for crew to offload off the plane, then reload onto the plane. That also causes more delays. And last but not least, maintenance time is also a main concern. So these kind of three metrics all feed into the turnaround time, or TAT for short, as we kind of condense it into one. And that's, I think, how we best can achieve that corporate overall goal of being the best in class. As you can see from our financials as well, I think the financial seems very promising and with a very positive ROI on the table.
So your assessment is that the delays are the cause for not being the best in class. Is that correct?
Yeah, I could follow up for us. So we think that delays are often a core source of both employee frustration, because when you're on the ground, you're not paid. That's a waste of your time effectively, right? And for customers, none of us like sitting in an airport waiting for things, right? So if you can improve your overall customer experience and you can improve your employees' experience, that's how we think you can win.
Question on the predictive analytics. So that's dependent on solid and reliable sources of information driving the machine learning models to provide recommendations. How have you considered that component?
So we obviously know garbage in, garbage out when we talk about these ML models, right? And data quality is really important. So in our IBM solution, IBM actually provides some modules within their vendor marketplace, as Sean talked about, that actually link directly in order to ensure data quality. What this actually looks like is a data observability layer on top of your current data stack in order to analyze, hey, are there anomalies? Is data fresh? Is the right data coming in? Softwares that are currently on the IBM marketplace include things like Monte Carlo or Anomalo, which are some leading startups in that field. So we intend to use this marketplace once we've, and I think we've have a pretty comprehensive timeline on how we're going to deal with this. And as a result, we have to really work through these rigorously with our engineers.
Thanks. One follow-up. So how are we getting the data back from the physical aircraft? Understand the connectors, but you're going to need to know things you highlighted, tires, engine time, et cetera. So how are you getting those raw feeds back in and putting them into the model?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, we didn't have the time to go through everything in this presentation, but I think we're going to most likely use IoT devices, right? IoT sensors that provide real-time data through data streaming into our platforms. That's likely the solution. I would imagine if we actually go to the depreciation schedule, a lot of these planes are actually quite old, so we actually need to install a lot of these IoT devices in, which is probably why you're asking this question. And I think it is a really crucial part. So I think sensors are going to be a large part of it, and updating the important technical part of the planes to be more modern day.
One of the things that you mentioned was, you asked the question, what is a digital twin? And that speaks to the newness of the technology and probably a lot of unfamiliarity in the industry. I'm just curious, as you put together this deck, did you have any use cases or come across any good examples of other aviation companies that have invested in digital twin technology?
Mm-hmm. This is actually quite interesting, but first, let's kind of differentiate what is a digital twin versus simulation. I think that's kind of like a key differentiator there. With the digital twin, it's basically a simulation plus AI, plus ML, and plus the news capabilities that are quite new, as you kind of mentioned. One key company that has kind of pioneered digital twin recently is Boeing. They did a lot of research into kind of the space and kind of predicting not only wind conditions, but tire conditions and many more factors than we possibly can. So it's a much more regional player, but it's actually our advantage. So imagine you have, 20 fleets of planes, millions of customers, so it's very much more complicated to implement a digital twin, whereas with PCA, a much more scaled down version focusing on kind of the key KPIs only, it's much faster to implement, but also less complex of a process or problem. So even though digital twin, very lofty, big idea, when implemented in real life, it's much more simple since we are a more complex and more lean organization than, for example, Boeing or maybe Canada Airways.
A good presentation, very advanced. Just when you were going through this process and you had mentioned there was your numbers, did you guys have estimated revenue numbers for PCA? Just
Yeah.
what were they? And then and sorry if I overlooked this.
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit of revenue projections. We took in flight data from every single day, and we looked at what routes they ran and the average ticket price of every single one of those routes in order to calculate a daily revenue, and then we scaled that to a yearly revenue. In terms of expenses, we took a look at A4A, which is Airplanes for America. They had a standard benchmark for the average cost of an airplane. So that was 32% in labor, and then 20% in fuel, and so on and so forth. And from there, we projected out what revenues were going to be. We also projected out things like depreciation of new planes, and we used current websites that are selling those type of planes in order to analyze. But all of this is an estimation. We didn't have concrete numbers out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, and then what would the cost to the company be, sorry if I overlooked that, to implement the digital twin and I think it was the IBM iPass? What's the cost of that?
Oh, okay. So the exact numbers are here. So our EFAS solution is going to cost in our first year around $250,000.
What about all up? For the digital twin and the iPass, how much does that cost the organization?
Well, if my quick math serves me right here, around $1.8 million in our first year. And then when we get to our year 4 and 5, our one-time cost of implementation, hiring a team of experts to come in and implement it, will go down because those are one-time. Okay. And the recurring costs are things like licensing, maintenance and support, and things along those lines.
Okay, great, thank you.
I think in the interest of time, you had to kind of skim over your risk analysis slide. This is the recommendations that you have are kind of high risk, high reward. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit, this is a small company. If money gets tight, if there's a dip in the industry, which you do first, which of your solution you might need to trim, and where you think that you would get the biggest bang for the buck.
Yeah, for sure. So we think that if we have to cut down on things, the very first thing is that unified data layer. We think that our solution effectively builds on top of each other. The data layer is foundation one. So if there's no money, that data layer is still very useful because then at least you get maintenance communicating with passengers, passenger services. We get the MMS communicating with the scheduling services. So that's layer one. In terms of digital twin, we don't have to twin every single one of our flight paths or every single one of our fleet of one of our 3 fleets of types of planes rather. So you can twin the most frequent flights. So an example would be Vancouver to Victoria. That's a very frequent flight, high capacity, often has a lot of delays, probably more issues to arise. So that would be the one that we want to focus our simulations on. In fact, if money is tight, we can run a beta test on that, work with the company, see if it works, and then we can, in the future, scale to all of our routes with all of our planes. And so that's kind of how we would build on top of it.
I'm assuming no further questions. All right. Thank you, team, for your presentation, and to our judges for your insights and expertise. Now, if judges are good with continuing to the next presentation, we will. Just to check in. All right, a 2-minute break before the next presentation. Thank you.